Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Secret Resume podcast, hosted by me, Melody Moore. In this podcast, we explore the people, places, and experiences that have shaped my guests, those which have influenced who they are as people and where they are in their work life today. You can listen in as we have a rich exploration of often unexamined and undiscussed, but very important aspects of their lives, or as I like to call it, their secret resume. My guest today is Julie Smith. So welcome, Julie. Really excited to have you here today. I can see into your beautiful office with all of your books behind you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Yes, many books, some of which I've read, most of which I've read, some of which I haven't yet.
It's your version of reading like mine that you've opened it and maybe read one or two pages and then thought, oh, I don't need to read all of this.
Yeah, some of that, although I'll always put it back with the intention of reading it, coming back later and reading it, but I just don't always get around to it. There's some that have probably been on there for 10 years and I've not actually got around to reading it yet, but I will one day.
One day. And do you, what's your view on writing in books? Do you write notes? Do you use sticky notes?
I use sticky notes. And I love it, actually. I picked up a book recently because I was going to recommend it to somebody and I saw it was absolutely covered in like the little sticky notes. And I just thought that was brilliant. It was such a reminder that it was a rich book. There was a lot of content that I liked. So it felt good to be recommending it. And I write notes, like a bit like a sort of university library type of idea. I write notes separately. I quite like to have my own notes to come back to.
I have to say, I sometimes am sacrilegious and write in the book, but I know it makes me feel guilty. But yeah, I'm a great fan of the sticky notes. In fact, I discovered sticky notes that are like a bookmark the other day, so they're all lined up like a bookmark, and then you can use them. Nice. I was like, oh, this is handy.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Yes. So tell me, let's start off by just telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into your secret resume.
Okay, so gosh, who I am and what I do. It sounds like one of those simple questions that could lead to lots of reflection on kind of identity. It could be quite deep. Anyway, I'll go simple. So I'll start with what I do. I'm a coach, a leadership coach. So work with individuals. I work with teams, leadership teams. I also do, I guess, what you call consulting work in organizations. So supporting businesses to have the leadership and the culture that they want or that they need to achieve their goals. I'm also a wife and a mum, and I'm also getting used to this now. I'm also an author. I just finished writing my first book, as you know.
Have you changed your LinkedIn profile to say you're an author?
I have. And I also, I did it during the process of writing it. And I also changed on my email signature, it says author. And I think I don't know whether subconsciously it was kind of, you sort of got to finish the thing then, haven't you? If you've declared to the world that you're an author, then you've got to get all the way there and get a book out into the universe.
I haven't put it on there yet.
You're so close.
I know, but I haven't done it. It's interesting, isn't it? A friend of mine, his sister was an Olympic rower, and she used to say that you should declare things. That was her thing, that you should declare your goals and your ambitions widely, so that people you'll feel that you have to do it then.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously, if I declared I was going to be an Olympic rower, I'm not sure it would happen. But yes, I've always, that's always stuck. It was a really long time ago that he told me that, and it's always stuck with me. That kind of declaration of intent.
Well, it's a bit like often in like programs or sessions that I run, I get people to say, even if it's just to the person next to them at the end, what is it I'm taking away? What might I do? And there is something about saying that out loud, declaring it to somebody else, that your likelihood of doing it goes up, because I guess there's somebody who might hold you accountable. So it's a bit of a version that, really. I think I'm going to get in touch with you next week and check that I feel like you should put it on your LinkedIn profile. Melody, now is time.
It is probably time. You're right. I will. I promise. So we'll come back to the book because it's such a great sounding book. I want to talk some more about that. But let's go back to the beginning of your career. And talk a little bit about some time you spent in Paris.
Yeah, which sounds incredibly glamorous, but wasn't, is in short. So Paris, I worked in Paris for 6 months, and it was the start of my career. So I joined Mars after university on their graduate training scheme, moved from historic York to industrial Basingstoke for the drinks division of Mars that was based there. Glamour, absolutely. And the training program, like the graduate program, you did 3 assignments, so 3 different parts of the business, 3 different functions, and it was optional, but you could choose to do one of those abroad. And quite early on, so I started in September, and quite early on I asked to go abroad for my assignment. So 6 months after I started work, so I was just 22, I went off to Paris for 6 months, working in the French office in HR and doing everything in French. And it was an experience, which I guess is why it's on this secret resume. I think it probably gives something away that I have quite a strong memory of sitting on the plane, flying out for the first time and sobbing to myself. So I'm on the plane on my own, just quietly sobbing. I think partly because I had quite a big hangover, but mainly because I was just feeling really overwhelmed with the whole thing. And it was hard. It was really hard. I had another memory was coming home. So I lived in the centre of Paris, because you might as well make the most of it. The office was out near the airport, but I lived in the centre of Paris, which meant I did drive in Paris, terrifying. Got home one Friday evening, so I'd battled my way around the peripherique. I'd battled my way home, walked in, and when I turned the light switch, nothing happened, and the electricity had been cut off, which was actually pretty understandable because I'd never let the energy firm know that I lived there. So nobody was paying the bill. And as far as they were concerned, the property was vacant or someone was squatting. So yeah, it got cut off. But there were some brilliant moments. I did get to know Paris quite well. It's beautiful. I loved that. But there was a lot that was really, really hard about it. And I felt that I just sort of survived the 6 months rather than I sort of endured and survived the 6 months rather than really enjoying it.
It's quite a brave thing to go and do at a tender age of 22, just go off to France. Why?
Yeah.
What was it that made you want to do it?
Well, I think it is a brave thing to do. And I think my learning, as I look back, was I think my reason for doing it wasn't necessarily a sound one. So I think my reason for doing it was more about it, other people would be impressed, or it was somehow a cool thing to do, or it was a brave thing to do. But it was more sort of how other people would see it rather than I really wanting to do it. And I think probably the truth was I didn't really want to. I was terrified. And I think I sort of pushed myself to do something that maybe I wasn't really ready for, or didn't perhaps have the confidence for, wasn't ready for yet. So I think that question about why is actually quite an interesting one in that case.
And had you studied French? Is that why you were able to work in France?
I did A-level French, and I'd always found French really easy. It was a sort of just a gift of an A-level, just because I don't know, I suppose I didn't find all languages easy, but something about French was straightforward for me. So the bit about it being in French wasn't too bad. And I did get to the stage where I was dreaming in French, which I think is a good sign of comfort with the language. Something approaching fluency, although I definitely wasn't fluent. But yeah, it was more that living on your own without any friends or family in the country, getting to know a city, driving on the wrong side of the road, all of that. It was just, that's a lot. And it was a lot for me at that age.
And was the environment welcoming to you? Your colleagues, did they welcome you, make you feel at home?
They did. I mean, the office was welcoming. They did welcome me, and they really helped me with my French, and they tried not to sort of wrinkle their nose at my accent when I opened my mouth, and they were really supportive. And there was an English guy in the office, John, him and his wife were brilliant to me. So I turned up at their house that Friday evening when I had no electricity. I phoned my dad first of all, because somehow I thought he might be able to help from Nottingham at the end of the phone. And then, having found that he didn't have a magic wand, I phoned John, and they just said, get in the car, come here. And I did. And they were just, they were brilliant throughout. So there was a warmth, and there was some support, but I still felt lonely, and particularly evenings and weekends, sometimes it felt like a bit of an ordeal.
And so it was a relief to get back to the UK, to Basingstoke.
Yeah, it was.
Who knew?
It was a real relief. Who knew that I would be so excited about returning to Basingstoke? Maybe that's the purpose of the whole thing, was to make me like Basingstoke. And I did think, as I was reflecting for this, I remembered that the office, they were lovely in the office, and they had a collection when I left. And the leaving gift was the oddest gift I've ever received. And I just feel like somebody was given the job, panicked, and didn't have much time. And I got a matching set of towels. So, I mean, beautiful as they were, I was 22, returning to a shared house. It wasn't really necessarily the obvious choice.
Maybe it is in France. Maybe it's has some significance that you don't know.
Maybe so.
Or maybe they care more about towels. Actually, that might be it. So take us to your next, which was a person, really. It was towards the end of your graduate scheme.
Yes.
Talk a bit about that.
Yes. So still Mars. So the deal with the graduate scheme was varied a bit, but in the division that I was in, the deal was you did 3 different assignments, and then at the end of that time, which was 18 months, you were either promoted or you were fired. That was the thing, because the whole sort of premise of the scheme was we're recruiting for potential, and we want people to be able to move through quickly. And for me, at the end of that 18 months, I was offered a job at the same level. So I was neither promoted nor fired, and the rules were broken. And the person that I remember was actually he was the HR director of the division that I was in. I'll call him Eric. That wasn't actually his name, but I'll call him Eric. And I will always remember, I can sort of picture myself in this meeting, in this conversation. I could picture myself there, and he said, I need you to know that I'm only doing this, I only approved this because Christine Kirby, my amazing boss, pushed hard for this to be the decision. She thinks that you can do it. She thinks you just need a bit more time and you can do it. I disagree. I don't think you can do it. So he told me to my face that he didn't think I was going to be able to do it. Yeah, and I think it's one of those really interesting conversations that I would have said, well, definitely at that time, my confidence was quite fragile. And I think that's the sort of conversation that could have crushed me. But actually, it didn't crush me. It didn't even upset me, but it did make me really, really angry. And I thought, right, screw you, I will prove you wrong. And I think that's what it did. So actually, I've got a lot to be grateful for as I look back to that conversation, because I did prove him wrong. So it was it feels like a pivotal moment that at the time was a bit tough, but it had a great impact.
Do you know why he said it? Like, did he say why?
No, he was quite an interesting chap. He was German by nationality. He was quite sort of quiet in that he didn't say very much. He was also quite softly spoken. And I remember him looking at me really intently as he said it. And I do wonder whether his intention was to light a fire. I do wonder whether that was his hypothesis, that that's what I needed.
So you said that you thought that he may have had an ulterior motive, which was to set a fire underneath you. And he was right?
I think so. And I don't know whether that's just me being charitable as I look back, but he was a bright chap and he was quite intuitive. So yeah, if that was his intention, then it feels like it had some risk attached, but it did work. It really did. And actually, I think it did play a part in boosting my sort of self-worth, if you like, because it made me grab hold of this, right, I will prove you, and I can prove you wrong, and sort of weirdly boosted my confidence when I might have anticipated that it would do the opposite.
You said that you at that point had a fragile confidence. Had you always struggled with confidence to that point?
Yes, I did know that I was capable, but I didn't always feel it, if that's not a strange distinction to make. So I sort of knew it, and I knew, and I'd seen data for that. I mean, it was difficult to get on the Mars scheme. There were thousands of people who applied and 14 who were offered. And so there were ways in which I knew that I was capable, but my self-doubt was very easily triggered. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Was this an HR graduate scheme, or did you just end up in HR as part of it?
I just ended up in HR. So it was a business training scheme. I started off in buying, and I was terrible. I'm the sort of person that, a buyer who would often like to pay the supplier more rather than less. I mean, that was terrible. Then I did HR when I was in France, and then I did logistics for a while when I got back, which was logistics between the UK and France. So I was able to use some of my language and some of my knowledge. And then I went into HR because that's what I had really enjoyed.
And what was it about HR that drew you into it?
That's a really good question. I think maybe because it is so explicitly about both the business and the people. And people are fascinating. So I think there's something about that. I think it was also the variety and the responsibility that I could have. So when I did get my non-promotion and I stayed, I was the HR business partner for sales, and that included things like, quite a bit of recruitment. And I remember having my name on an advert when newspapers were still the way that you recruited for people. We had to have it on the front page of I don't know whether it was the Times or the Telegraph supplement, whichever it was. And it said, apply to Julie Carter, as I then was. And so it did feel like a responsibility to be running the process that brought people into the organisation to generate sales. So that was really appealing as well.
And then you show your family, look, my name's on the front
exactly
page.
That I did, and I kept it for a long time. I don't think I've got it anymore, but I did have it for a long time.
And so your next thing that you're going to talk about actually was in an HR role in Walker's factory.
Yes. Yeah. So after Mars, I went to work for PepsiCo at the Walker's manufacturing plant. It was Walker's newest plant in Leicester, which is actually, it's about 5 miles less than down the road from where I'm sitting now. And that was, at the time, it felt like a really big HR job that they offered me. So I remember getting the job. So somebody phoned me first of all, and obviously I got all the paperwork, and I just sort of fairly quickly went from yay to oh shit, what have I done, and feeling quite, I guess it's back to confidence, but feeling pretty fearful about being the lead HR person for a site and having a team of people working for me. And I still remember going into Waterstones in Nottingham and buying a book called People Management for Dummies, which was just, I just can't believe I picked it up, but it felt like that's what I needed. I felt like such a, I don't know what I'm doing, I suppose an imposter in a number of ways in the job, but particularly in having people work for me. Like, who the hell am I to be anybody's manager? So I kind of hoped that buying and consuming said book, I think I did actually read it as well, back to our conversation earlier, I did actually read it, but hoping that would kind of make up for a lack of experience and the lack of confidence in that area.
You mentioned feeling like an imposter there. A lot of people talk about imposter syndrome. Some people are very anti it as a term.
Yeah.
What's your view on imposter syndrome?
It's interesting that I use the word, actually, because I have avoided it in the books. I'm going to talk later, the book's about confidence, but I've avoided the term, and particularly the term imposter syndrome, because I feel like now it's got quite a lot attached to it. It's a bit distracting as a term, because there is the debate about whether it's useful or not. There's also the fact that it feels as though it's got quite a gender tag to it, that it's attached to women. And I feel like therefore it's become unhelpful. It's become a bit distracting from the more sort of fundamental questions about confidence. Where does it come from? Confidence and gender, because there is a piece about confidence individually, confidence in a system, confidence in a society. There is a kind of gender aspect to it. But imposter syndrome feels as though it's not helpful now.
So when you talked about feeling like an imposter in that job, what was it that made you feel like that?
So I think I said earlier that my self-doubt was easily triggered, and I think it was just the size of my self-doubt. So I didn't see as clearly the capabilities that the business saw. So they believed I was capable, and they offered me the job, and I sort of saw that, and I would have come across well at interview and put forward my capability and my experience well. But there was a part of me that didn't fully believe that, or there was a gap between an objective assessment of my capability and my own sense of my capability, which I guess you'd call, confidence. There was a gap between the two. And I do think that Laycroft Road, which was the place, that the manufacturing plant, I think the 2 years that I spent there, one of the big themes was overwork and over delivery. And I don't mean overwork in terms of an unreasonable expectation or an unreasonable workload set by the business. I mean, my own addiction to overwork, because it was my substitute at the time, I think, for confidence. And I remember that a guy who, one of the plant managers I worked for, David, was brilliant. I remember like an end of year event, and we were out in a bar somewhere, but we must have been a restaurant. We were sat down, the team, and he did some informal awards, and he gave me the ABCD award, which was the Above and Beyond the Call of Duty award. And I remember even in that moment thinking, there's something that's not good about this. There's something that's not good about being known for always going above and beyond. And I think I probably didn't realize at the time, but I can see it very clearly now, that the driver for going above and beyond was about sort of proving to myself and to others, and it was in lieu of the self-belief or the confidence that might allow me to do a good job but not do more than is required every time.
You mentioned that with your why you'd gone to France as well, that kind of proving things to other people. Do you think that's been a theme?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. But yeah, very strongly. And I think it's one of the reasons why confidence as a sort of thread, it's definitely a thread through the resume, and later a thread in terms of work and client work that I've done. But I think it's one of the reasons why it's of such interest to me, because it's really personally, it's been a big deal. It's been a big presence. Kind of confidence, or maybe more accurately, its lack, has been a big presence for a chunk of my career.
And did you find that your confidence built as a result of those 2 years that you spent there?
Yes, a bit, I'd say. I don't think it was probably, I think it was later time in Pepsi where there was more of an acceleration in my confidence. I think it grew a bit in those 2 years because just because of the breadth of experience and the things that I dealt with and got through and learned, that sort of contributed to my understanding of what I was able to do. So it was my first time that I'd worked in manufacturing setting, supporting manufacturing. And so things like just quite a high number of disciplinaries. There were court cases. There were 2 employees died in while they were employed, not at work, but while they were employed. And all of those things, another employee was sent to prison, and I had to figure out, how do you terminate someone's employment on the basis that they can't turn up because they've been in prisons for quite a long time. So there was a lot that I learned and experienced for the first time, and I think that did contribute to okay, I can do this as well, I can figure this out. But it feels like, looking back, feels like a sort of gradual growth in confidence, bit by bit, and quite hard won through all that hard work and effort.
Do you have mentors or people you could turn to and say, "Oh my God, what this has happened? What would you do?"
Yeah, one of the things that immediately comes back when I was at Pepsi was there was a kind of a team of HR managers for different sites, and I would call them up. There were people I could call up. I remember in the early days calling somebody called Orla, who was just, she didn't stay that long actually, but she was there, and she was probably the first on my list of Orla, this has happened. What the hell? Or, this has happened. Is this normal? Or what would you do? And she was such a brilliant voice of kind of sanity and reason. I was like, okay, that's really settling. Thank you. I'll go off. Yeah, and there was also Jackie, who was my boss, who's the next, as you know, a person on my secret resume. She was also just somebody I could kind of call and say, help, or this is really new. And generally she would just be a brilliant coach. So she didn't tell me what to do, but she helped me to figure it out. And I guess in that process was trying every time to remind me that I could figure it out, that I did know, or I could figure out what to do.
So shall we move to her as
Yes.
your next part of your secret resume?
Yeah. So I've got a big smile on my face as I'm thinking about Jackie. Jackie didn't recruit me actually, but the person who recruited me left about 6 weeks after I joined. So Jackie ended up being my boss either directly or indirectly for almost the whole of the time that I was at, the whole of the 11 years that I was at Pepsi. And the reason that she appears on my secret resume is about confidence, and is about, she made such a difference to my confidence. And I think in a couple of key ways. So one of the ways that she gave me a lot of opportunities and challenges. So she gave me a lot of opportunities, some of which I really enjoyed and welcomed, and some of which were god awful at the time, but they were important, or I learned from, they were stretching. And so in doing that and giving me so much opportunity to do something new and figure it out or go wrong and then course correct, it helped to contribute to that sort of increasing sense, or my own increasing understanding of what I could do. So yeah, to sort of push me to develop new capabilities and to see that I had those new capabilities. And then the other thing that I've said a number of times about Jackie, and I think it's absolutely true, is that she believed in me so fully, just unwaveringly, and so consistently, so wholeheartedly, that in the end I sort of had to believe in myself. There was and that she's no longer with us, very sadly. We lost Jackie far too young, but her impact, and I know on lots of other people as well, but her impact on me is so lifelong, because she did in those multiple ways really help me to find my confidence. I cannot imagine doing what I do now if I hadn't had 11 years with Jackie. I really can't imagine that. I need confidence for what I do now, and I think she's part of the reason why I've got it. Part of the reason why I found my own confidence, I think.
And so was it the combination of the pushing you to do things you wouldn't have put your hand up for? Yes, so there was a good degree of pushing.
Yeah I think, and even things that I didn't enjoy. So I implemented an HR and payroll system, and I never want to do that ever again, but I found that I could do it. Like, I didn't really enjoy it, but it did involve a very different skill set to being a generalist HR manager in a manufacturing plant. And so finding that even if it wasn't something I wanted to do again, I could do it, and I could do it successfully. I think that was a really important lesson. There was just a whole series of those things, and I think probably the other sort of theme, Jackie would probably give me an opportunity before I thought I was ready for it. Not way before, so it was too terrifying, but maybe just a bit before I might have thought myself ready for it, which I think is really helpful, because it's a helpful shove into your stretch zone, not into panic, but a shove into stretch.
Yes. Yeah, so it's like a shove enough, but not too much.
Yeah, and a shove with a whole load of support attached to it. So it was a whole load of support and belief. So, you know, I always trusted that she wouldn't have put me in a position that she wouldn't put me in any position she didn't think that I could handle. And that in itself has well, it's reassuring, I suppose. It has an encouraging effect to it.
What do you think she saw in you that you didn't?
Oh, that's a good question. I think she saw me. I think it's just that she saw me clearly in a way that I, at that point, couldn't. So I in the book, I talk about faulty calibration, and I have this sort of metaphor of looking in mirrors. You know, when you go to like a seaside pier or an amusement arcade, and sometimes the mirrors are distorted. And I think the way I looked in the mirror at that point in time was distorted, in that I saw my strengths as smaller than was actually the case, and I saw gaps or deficiencies as big, or opportunities as bigger than was the case. And I think it's almost like I'm picturing that Jackie's standing next to me, and she could see me in a undistorted mirror. She could see me how I really was, and I couldn't, or couldn't until I could, if that makes sense. It's almost gradually, the distorted mirror was corrected, and I could see myself in the way that she could see me.
It's really interesting, isn't it? But my immediate thought goes to, you know, where does that distortion come from in the first place?
Yeah.
Is that something that you cover in the book? You know, where the origins of lack of confidence?
No, not really. I think partly because the origins, in my mind, sort of stray perhaps more into therapy territory than coaching. So I think I kind of sit with how does that impact you? So if there is a distortion, how does that show up, and what can you do about it? I think, gosh, it's a really big question, isn't it? Where does that come from? Really big question. It's also that it's quite difficult to sort of isolate, because it comes from, so I think it's sort of attached to, so for me it's attached to some of the brilliant things that I would want to keep hold of. So some of the distortion in terms of kind of big self-doubt, or seeing development opportunities as bigger than they really were, contributed to pushing myself hard, which contributed to achieving. Now, it wasn't necessarily always enjoyable a process or achievement, or you could go back to the Paris example, it wasn't necessarily even the right thing to be seeking to achieve, but there was something, I don't know, something powerful in there. Yeah, I don't know, I'm maybe going off piste slightly, but it sort of points to the complexity of the complex answer to a simple question of kind of, where does your confidence come from, or where does its lack come from, or why doesn't it always show up consistently? Why can I feel confident one moment and then in a trough of doubt the next?
Well, it just reinforces to me what you just talked about there, about how no one, or rarely is one thing about us fundamentally bad or good. You know, like you say, there are things that you will have got from that lack of confidence that benefited you.
Definitely.
But it's the when does it get in your way more than it is benefiting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that fundamentally it is good for us. It's certainly been good for me, and I feel it's good for people I've worked with if we can find a way to balance to find an appropriate level of confidence, by which I mean it sort of matches our capability. So what I describe in my experience, often my confidence was lagging behind my capability, and I wouldn't want to replace that with the sort of alternative, the opposite of being overly confident, but just being kind of having that sort of grounded confidence that it kind of matches up with, I know what I can do. I've got a realistic sense of what I'm able to do, and I can own that, including my strengths, and be okay with the things that I'm not able to do. There's a sort of realism about it.
So talk to me about you chose at a point to leave Pepsi, or PepsiCo, is that the right name for it, PepsiCo? There was a particular event that led to you leaving somewhere where you'd been for quite some time, and I just wondered if you were okay to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I am. And I think it's absolutely sort of secret resume stuff, in that it has had it was quite pivotal in terms of my career, but it's never something I'd write on a actual CV. So it's probably that I'd had sort of an intention somewhere in my mind to leave Pepsi at some point, and thought that when I did leave, I would set up on my own. So it didn't sort of come out of the blue. That had been an intention, but I didn't have any time scale. I wasn't in a rush, and I didn't have any time scale attached to that. And then almost exactly 14 years ago, I had a miscarriage, and it was between my two children, and it was actually the second miscarriage that I'd had, and it was at a point in the pregnancy where I thought I was okay. We were beginning to feel confident that this would be all right, and then it wasn't, and not surprisingly, that had a seismic effect. And I think one of the things that it led me to do was to resign, because I think, yes, there had been this intention to leave, but I think when I felt out of control of my own life, that this big thing had happened that I didn't want to happen. This was a big decision that I was in control of. I felt like I needed to change something, and this was something that I could change. So without enormous thought, so I did sit down and I mapped out, I remember doing a mind map of who are people I know who might give me work, and what sort of work might I do. So these sort of two mind maps, and then I resigned. So it's interesting. I would never, I never wanted that to happen. I would never wish that experience on anyone. And I certainly wouldn't say that I was glad that it happened, but I can look at that loss as a catalyst for a new stage in my career, which I've loved. So yeah, as I say, it feels like quintessential secret resume stuff.
Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing. I know it's not easy to talk about these things, and so thank you for sharing that with us. And it strikes me that you're someone who a number of times has taken negative experiences of different kinds and used them to turn them into positives and into, a driver for doing something different.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. I think we'll come to it. That was one of the things that sort of struck me as I thought about the secret resume and a kind of tagline for it and that kind of thing. I think there is a sort of sense of forward momentum, maybe even when things happen that are really horrible at the time. They can lead to something positive. They can definitely lead to something positive.
And so when you left, is that when you set up Talent Sprout?
Yeah, which probably brought.
And so
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and that's been how long now? 13 years, did you say?
Yeah, 13, must be 13 and a half years. Yeah. Sorry,
I interrupted you as well. What were you about?
Well, I suppose I was really just going to say that it brings me to, the most recent part of, and it's probably not really secret resume because it's what would appear on my CV or LinkedIn profile, but the idea of a place, what came to me was actually the importance of the place where I'm sitting right now, which is my desk. I have my office in the sort of corner of our front room at home, and I love this little part of our house. I love the fact that I've got all of my many books, read and unread, behind me. I love the fact that that's part of the backdrop that people see because it feels very me. And this place now represents the Talent Sprout chapter in my career, which I love, and which, again, as I reflected for today, I was thinking, well, what is it? Why would I just say, oh, it's brilliant, love it? I think it fits with, or it serves a number of values, I think. So there's something about learning. I love learning, and I've learned so much. And I don't tend to repeat things. I tend to do new work with, or new work with the same clients, or take on new clients, learn new sectors, etc., etc. And so there's just always feeding my appetite for learning. I am my own boss. I love that. I love because the independence that brings, the capacity for choosing what I do or don't do, what I choose to emphasize, what I don't. Variety, love the variety. So again, I feel that's another need that is met. There's definitely a need around accomplishment, being good at what I do. And I feel like that's actually it's probably even more being seen as good at what I do. And that's present as well. And then the fact that I guess you go back to the sort of the start of the organisation came from a family event, came from the miscarriage, and then the very fact of working for myself has given me the ability to balance work and family, I think, more easily than had I stayed within a corporation. So I think, and again, links back to sort of the choices that I can make if a number of years I've not worked at all in August, or for the whole school holiday, and I can do that, which is a joy.
Or as I was saying, I didn't do that this year. I need to learn from you to teach me how to do that. And talk to me then about what made you write your book, Coach Yourself Confident. We've talked about confidence a lot throughout this conversation. So what led you to think, I'm going to write a book about this?
Yeah. So I think some of the answer is in my own experience and the sorts of things that I've talked about. So I think just it's been a, kind of up close and personal experience of confidence. And then alongside that, it's been such a theme in the work that I've done. So it appears, in my experience, it feels like it appears a lot in coaching work. sometimes as the sort of headline. So, somebody might say that is what they want to work on, but actually much more often it becomes evident that it's that a lack of confidence is playing a part in what they want to work on. So they might come and say, I don't know, I want to, I need to get a better balance between strategy and operational stuff. And actually you sort of dig under the surface and there's all sorts of things that they believe about themselves and their capability and strategy, or the way they see themselves, that is playing a part in that. Or work home balance. So actually, people who are doing what I described that I did at Lecovert, and just working and achieving and delivering and doing really well, but there's a cost attached to that. There's a potential burnout at stake there, and it's actually being fueled by this sort of need to prove that comes from a kind of lack of confidence. So I think the fact that it has been a thread for me, and that I've seen it as a thread in different ways for so many of the leaders I've supported, it just, I guess, quite fascinated by it and wanted to offer something that is accessible for people. So I have been able to support other people sometimes to find their confidence. But not everybody can have an executive coach. Not everybody's in that position. So part of the idea of the book and the title is it's a bit, it's like having a coach within the covers of a book that you can access at a much more reasonable cost, and at 24/7. You can pick it up when you need it and when you've got time to. So yeah,
a coach in your pocket.
Yeah. Yes, I do think you need quite big pockets, but yeah, the idea is definitely there.
So it's aimed at mostly at people who are wanting to build their own confidence. Is that who your ideal audience is?
So I think it's people who are in work, probably in a sort of professional setting, who know about themselves, and other people might see it or not. Sometimes we're good at hiding our lack of confidence, but they know themselves that there is this gap between their capability and their sense of their capability, their confidence, and their confidence is kind of lagging behind. They don't fully know or believe how good they are. And I took the sort of blurb on the back, and it's expanded obviously in the pages, are broadly there might be two camps. One who do the overwork and over delivery and pay what I call the self-doubt tax in exhaustion, and the other is perhaps people whose self-doubt leads them to step back from opportunities, and maybe not to be quite risk averse, not take something on that might help them to see for themselves how good they are. So they're paying the self-doubt tax in a different way, and they're paying it in sort of missed opportunities, unfulfilled potential, ultimately. And some people pay it in both forms, actually, but that's
And it's out in February next year. Or it won't be next year by the time we put this out.
February 24, yeah.
February 24, brilliant. And available all good places.
Yeah, wherever books. You like to buy your books. I'd like to recommend bookshop.org, because they support, if you're doing it online, they support local booksellers. But of course, it is also available on Amazon.
It would be crazy to not be, wouldn't it? So I'm going to close off by asking you a few of my regular questions that I ask my guests. So my first one is about your advice to your younger self.
Yeah. So I think the advice would be to try to set aside the need to prove. And I say try to, because I realise that's just hard. That is hard to do. But it's so freeing if you can. So if you can set aside the need to prove, you're more able to make the decisions that are right for you and that you actually want to make, as opposed to somehow impressing somebody else or giving a particular impression to somebody else.
Right, thank you. And what about a strapline or a title for your story?
Yeah, I think so. What I came to is learning and growing. And I think, you know, I just feel like there's a sort of forward momentum in the sense that all of the experience, whether it appears in your CV or it's part of your secret resume, just shapes you and shapes where you, who you are and where you are today.
Lovely. And what about advice for aspiring authors?
Oh, yeah. So I think, the first thing I'd say is, so aspiring authors, wait for the right idea, or sit with an idea for long enough that you feel comfortable that it's the right idea, because you're going to be, and I guess I say that as opposed to, I want to write a book, what could I write it about? I think it works better if it sort of grows from within. It's almost like, okay, this idea, and it percolates, and you sit with it, and you're going to spend a hell of a lot of time with this idea. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to write a book. So don't rush that process. I suppose maybe the advice would be, don't rush that process of allowing an idea to kind of form and percolate, and to figure out whether it's the one that you want to live so closely with for a period of time.
Did you have other ideas that you discarded along the way?
No, I think I'd had a sort of an intention to, or a desire to write a book for years and years and years. And then I had this seed of an idea. I in fact thought I'd had a really genius idea that was an entire book, and it was about confidence. And as it turns out, it wasn't a genius idea. It doesn't even make it onto the pages of this book, let alone be the whole thing. But that, I suppose that was the start. That was the start of figuring out this as a territory that I was sufficiently interested in and felt like I was sufficiently informed about to write about. And then I just let it percolate, and I was able to, which was good practice for the writing process, I was able to let that initial genius idea wither away and die because it was rubbish. That is good practice. You have to do that. You have to be willing to do that, as you well know, willing to do that along the way.
Yes, actually, because I had an idea for a previous book, and kind of pulled together some chapters, and then just, I don't think I had the energy behind it, because it was so much easier to write the inclusive team, because it just kind of came to me. You know, it flowed, and I think that's the difference, isn't it? I was struggling to know where to start with the other one, whereas this just felt more right.
Maybe that other idea just needs a bit more percolation. It might be your next book. I mean, you know, maybe it will become kind of clear enough, or you'll get a similar energy for it. The other thing, I've got another piece of advice, if I can offer two. The other would be, reach out, because I have just been overwhelmed by the generosity of people. So either people who I knew, or people I don't know via social media, or other authors who are going through a similar process, and it has helped enormously. Like going through this, feeling like you're in community with others, has helped enormously. And I've got to know people through that. Melody, I wouldn't know you. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for kind of choosing to declare I'm writing this, and this is how I'm getting on, and engaging with others. And that's been brilliant. I would certainly advise people to do that.
It's one of the joys of social media, I think, that you are able to connect with people who you just wouldn't meet normally. But you have lots in common with them. I mean, we even went to the same university, although we didn't know each other. But it's I love that about social media. You know, it gets a lot of bad press, but I think the ability to connect is fantastic. Okay, final question. A book recommendation?
Yes. Yeah, that's caused me some stress because I've got lots of books behind me and lots of books that I love. I'm going to go with one, and then if you let me, I might do second. I'm going to go with this one, which is sorry, it doesn't work on a podcast. Is that I've reached behind me for a book. It is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, so it's quite recent. It's quite well known. I feel like it's just really worth everybody reading. So the 4,000 Weeks is roughly the amount of time that we all have on the planet. So it's about how do we make the most of our time on our lives. And it is, on whatever you could pick it up and think it's a time management book, but it's just not. It's a sort of life philosophy book, really. And I found it really just really thought-provoking, and I would recommend it to people, because I think almost everybody I know feels time poor, feels rushed, feels in this kind of swirl of things, and it's a very helpful antidote to that, I think.
I've never heard of it, so I would definitely be straight off to buy that
one.
Go on, you can have a second.
So I had one more, which is called The Art of Enough. It's by a friend of mine, Becky Hall. And Becky writes beautifully, and she writes, the idea of her book, I think, is just fabulous. It's about being enough, doing enough, and having enough. And those are the sort of three parts to it. So being enough is about kind of your sense of self, where you get your confidence from, self-worth. It's that territory. The doing enough is, well, it probably sits alongside. Actually, it was Becky who recommended 4,000 Weeks to me, and it is the sort of sense of how do you find the right level of kind of volume of work between kind of scarcity and abundance? What does enough look like? What does pushing yourself appropriately look like? How do you manage boundaries? How do you say no? So there's all sorts of rich content in there. Doing enough, and then the having enough is about how can we live in a way that's sustainable, and the inner sort of the consumer society that we live in, what choices can we individually make in the spirit of having enough, rather than the sort of social norm, I guess, of having more and more and more and more and more. So yeah, Becky's book would be my second recommendation.
Also sounds fantastic. I'm terrible though. As soon as I hear someone recommend a book, I'm like, right, I have to go and get it. It's a very expensive addiction I have.
Yes, I have the same, and yes, I hear you with that.
So, Julia, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. You've been very honest and shared some really interesting and challenging parts of your life. So, yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for asking me.
This podcast is brought to you by Liberare Consulting, with editing provided by Hawkins Social. If you enjoyed today's episode, why not click on the subscribe button so you are the first to hear about new episodes. We look forward to welcoming you back soon.